Okay, so in general the tour starts from here, from in front of the property, and we go to talk just 1 second about the place, so the region where we are here and what we make here, before to start to explain you something about Viticcio. It's really important to remember that here we are in the Chianti Classico region, and the Chianti Classico is a small portion of area located between the south of Florence and the north of Siena. In total, they are only 60 kilometers of land, so you can imagine that it's really, really small. This region today is famous around the world for the production of the Chianti Classico wine, but consider that when we talk about Chianti Classico, we talk about, yes, a territory, a wine, but in particular also a brand. Because the Chianti Classico has the brand of the Black Rooster, that is the brand of the Chianti Classico Association. This association gives to us, to the producer, the rule for the production of this kind of wine. And the most important one that we have to remember is that the Chianti Classico have to respect always minimum the 80% of Sangiovese grape inside. So it's really important to remember that Chianti or Chianti Classico is not a kind of grape, but is a kind of wine. It's a name, okay? The grape, which while is produced this wine, is a minimum of 80% of Sangiovese. The other 20% for rule can be composed by other kind of grape, for example from Merlot, Canaiolo, Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, Colorino, so from international different kind of grape. For sure not all the grape of the world, but we have some restriction also on the other 20%. Consider that it's really important to remember that when we talk about Chianti Classico, doesn't mean exactly Chianti, okay? Because the simple Chianti wine can be produced in other area of Tuscany. For example, in the north of Florence, in the south of Siena, close to the coast in Pisa or close to Arezzo. So can be produced all around the Chianti Classico region, that is like the heart of the Chianti production. In Italy also, when we talk about the denomination classic, we talk about a really important place of production. But why we have this situation today? Because everything started to be produced here, but in the 14th century, so many centuries ago. And in the beginning, this wine take the name only from the place of production, so it was called Chianti just because it was produced here, but was produced without particular rule. During the history, this production grew up a lot without rule. And in the beginning of the last century, this wine was produced like the same product here and, for example, in Pisa. Pisa is 2 hours drive from here, and Pisa is also close to the coast, so for sure in Pisa there are other conditions like soil, temperature, weather, and in the end these elements make the wine. So in the 1924, to reprotect the original production, was created the Chianti Classico Association. So was created the association that I explained you before, that also today give to us the rule of the production. From this moment, Chianti and Chianti Classico, they start to be two total different production and different product also. Think that, for example, the simple Chianti wine has to have minimum the 75% of Sangiovese, not the 80 inside. So two total different quantity of the same grape, they make in the end two total different kind of wine. Today, when we talk about Chianti Classico, in general, we talk about 3 different products: basic, reserve, and great selection. All these 3 different products, they have different characteristics, but in particular, they have different destination of using. Viticcio, so this property is a Chianti Classico producer, but we don't produce only Chianti Classico for sure. In total, we have 10 different labels in production, and we are considered a medium-sized producer because we produce every year 300,000 bottles of wine, more or less. These 300,000 bottles are made by 60 hectares of vineyards total that we have shared between 2 properties. This one, that is the main one, so everything takes the name from this place, and another winery that we have into the south of Tuscany, close to the coast in Grosseto. Why we need to have another property there? Because in this 10 different labels, we produce 4 kinds of DOCG wine. In Italy, when we talk about this DOCG wine, we talk about wine with a denomination, origin, controlled and guaranteed. So in general, we have to respect the territory of production first. The example that I make always is that if someone take a lot of Sangiovese and start to produce a wine in the UK, for example, that respect all the rule of the production of the Chianti Classico, in the end they can't call this wine Chianti Classico because it's not produced here. The same happened with the fourth DOCG wine, that is the Morellino di Scansano. Morellino di Scansano is a red Italian wine that can be produced only in the south of Tuscany, in province of Grosseto, where we have the other winery. So we need to have the other winery there to have this production. Consider that in our property we have also different kind of grape, because we don't have only Sangiovese. We have in particular Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Syrah, Vermentino, because we make also white wine. And it's really important to remember also during the tour that we have also different quality of the same grape, because for sure to produce Chianti Classico Basic I can't use the same Sangiovese grape that I use to produce the Great Selection. They are two total different products with total different characteristics like body, intensity, with total different quantity of alcohol inside, and in particular producing two total different quantity. Think about the Chianti Classico producing 150,000 bottles every year, so it's the half of the total production. The Great Selection is made only in 7,000 bottles and only in the best year of production. So in the end, what change? Change the age of the plant. So in general, by young plant, we produce the basic wine. We can go into the vines. We produce the basic wine. So wine not too alcoholic, wine really light, easy to drink and good to be drinking every occasion. By the old plant, we produce the more important product of the production, like can be, for example, the Reserve, the Great Selection. So wine more composed, stronger into the body, into the intensity and into the alcohol. The point of break is 15 years old of the plant. So until 15 years old are considered young and after are considered old. The oldest part of the property at the moment has 40 years old, and these the vines which while we produce the Great Selection. In this moment of the years we can see that there is nothing more here because the harvest is already finished. The harvest is a process that starts in general in the middle of September and after take 1 month until the middle of October. And after the finish of the harvest, we leave everything here for until the end of December, 1st of January, when in general we start with a big pruning. In these 2 or 3 months that everything stay here, the stems or the green part start to fall down on the soil. And we leave everything on the soil because for us it's really important to use a natural element to fertilize the soil. Also because we are organic, so we can't absolutely use chemical substance. During the harvest we go just to cut the grape that born at this level of the plant. How you can see now, we don't touch this kind of fruit. Why? Because they are too small and they are too far from the soil. So this fruit receive a less quantity of properties from the soil respect the fruit that born here. And when we start with the harvest, they have not the right conditions, so the right maturation to be picked. And they are not really good to be used for the wine production because they are too acid. So you risk to have a too acid wine. So we got to cut everything and we bring everything to the press where we go in a few minutes, where we start to work the product. Remember that the harvest is a process that is made per step. Okay, so when we go to harvest the Sangiovese, for example, where we go to pick the Sangiovese, we don't pick in general the Sangiovese, but we start depending about the maturation of the grape and depending also about the kind of wine that I have to produce into the end. In general, we start with, for example, Sangiovese and Syrah, which while we produce the Rosé. After we pass to Sangiovese, Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon, which while we produce the table wine. Sangiovese and Merlot for the Chianti Classico. Everything is maintained, always divide, share, until a certain moment that we see later into the cellar, where we make the blend for the wine. Why we need to maintain everything share? Because different quality of grape, how I explained before, they have different characteristics. In particular, they have different quantity of sugar inside. From the sugar depend the alcohol. So into the wine you will have different quantity of alcohol, and you can mix a different quality of Sangiovese because they have different destination. So during the harvest we bring everything here by tractor, and this machine by a slow movement, okay, start to share the grape, start to share the skin from the juice, and everything is bring into the other machine there. Into the other machine, we start to separate the green part, so the stems, from the red part. In this moment, we start to have the mousse, and the mousse is bring all into the first cellar where we go now, and where we start with the fermentation. With the green part, so with the stems, we use it to fertilize the soil. So everything come back into the land to fertilize it. Okay, so during the harvest, the grape, so juice and skin, are bring here to the still tanks, and to the still tanks immediately start the maturation, but also the alcoholic fermentation. The alcoholic fermentation is the process when the sugar inside of the grape change composition and became alcohol. But how happened this process in the end? Happened by a biological reaction that we have, in particular for the red wine, we have from the contact between skin and sugar contained into the grape. This contact changes the temperature inside, and the temperature go up. The changing of temperature form bubbles inside of the mousse, and the bubbles start to push the skin on the top of the still tanks. So we start to have a first separation between juice and skin, okay? And the part of the skin that arrives into the top is called in Italian cappello, so hat in English. But for us, during this process, it's really important to maintain everything together. Also because it's during this process that the skin releases color and properties inside of the juice. So we make a manual harvest, for example, to reprotect the skin of the grape, because into the skin are contained properties like tannins, sulfites, color and flavor. So all these elements now have to pass into the wine, and to maintain everything together we need to do rimontaggi, so remix everything together minimum twice per day every day, but we can arrive until 4th also. This fermentation is a process that takes maximum 20 days, so 20-25 days, so we talk about maximum 3 weeks. For sure, the period of the alcoholic fermentation change the quality of grape. So how we discussed before, we continue here to maintain all the kind of grape share, and we go to work, for example, Sangiovese for the Chianti classico, Sangiovese for the reserve, Sangiovese for the grape selection fish. So after this period, we make the last separation between juice and skin, okay? The juice can be considered really young wine, is taken and bring into the other cellar where we go now. For the explication of the barrique that we make in the other cellar. So we turn around together, and after we stop here for the explication. No there is a reason why I want to stop here.
Yeah.
So inside of this cellar, like in the other one where we were before, we have only French oak barrique. So and barrique.
These are the French, yes?
Yes, it's all French oak, and we have two kind of barrels: barrique, so the small one for 225 liters. And tonneau for 550 liters. The tonneau are
these are...
Yeah, are tonneau.
Yeah,
And
bigger.
also you can see after actually the new one that they will
Bigger.
arrive 2 weeks ago from the production 2018.
Ah,
So, in this kind of cellar, it's where we work the best wine of our production. Because you can understand that every kind of wine produced in the world, in general, follow different process of production. And also, between our 10 labels, we follow different process because, some example, the rosé. The rosé wine is produced by red grape. Red grape work like a white wine. So after the separation between juice and skin that happened immediately after the press, when the Sangiovese and Syrah they arrive into steel tanks, we start to work it like a white wine. So also the fermentation is made without skin. This kind of wine is worked for just 7 months and after it's ready. The same happened with the white. Imagine that for the basic GT wine, for the table wine, after the alcoholic fermentation, we bring Sangiovese, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon into the big barrels. We form the blend there, and after a few months, the wine is ready. But for the more important products, so in particular for the three Chianti Classico, Morellino and San, and for the Super Toscan in general, we work here in barrique and into the big barrels. Now, we talked just 1 second about the Chianti Classico because we have to discuss about some rules also that we have. For the aging of our Chianti Classico wines, we have rule about the time of aging that we have to respect from the Chianti Classico Association. So, we know that the Chianti Classico Basic have to age for minimum 12 months, the Reserve for minimum 24 months, and the Great Selection for a minimum of 30 months. But what we can decide? We can decide how work our wine. You know already our wine, and I think that you understand which is our idea, okay? Our idea of wine is produce wine that maintain always the original flavor of the grape. So the first thing that you have to feel when you smell the wine is the grape, which wine is composed the wine. So in the case of the Reserve, for example, that is composed by Sangiovese, Merlot, and Syrah, it's really important find element from the Sangiovese, from the Merlot, and from the Syrah. To make a little bit more elegant our wine, we can use the oak. But consider that every time that a barrique is built, in particular the barrique, they are burned inside by fire. And after this process, the oak start to lose flavor inside of the wine that contain flavor like vanilla, tobacco, leather, oak. So here the wine change smell because absorb element from the oak. If you leave the wine here for too much time, you risk to lose the flavor of the grape. So how we work in this time of aging? In general, we work in two steps. The first one in barrique and the second in big barrels. In barrique, the aging is made per different quality of grape. So it's always an example, but Sangiovese, Sangiovese, and Sangiovese, or Merlot and Merlot for the Chianti Classico and for the Reserve. After the first step, everything is bring upstairs into the big barrels. And into the big barrels, we make first the blend. So we form the final product. And after that, the wine start to age in another kind of aging. The wine there don't change anymore by the oak, but start to change by himself. So the real process of aging that after continues also in bottle start in the big barrels. The time of aging are these. For example, Chianti Classico Basic, 6 months here, 6 months upstairs, so total 12 months. The Reserve 12 plus 12 for the Great Selection, and the Super Tuscan 18 plus 12. But remember that every kind of wine, how we said in the beginning of the visit, is produced for a different destination. So for sure, the different kind of wine will follow different time of aging also, because not every wine produced to be aged. In the Chianti Classico line, for example, we find two cases. Chianti Classico Basic, that is a wine produced to be drunk in every occasion. So it means that when arriving in bottle, this wine is ready. if you age it for a couple of years, okay, but you can't keep this wine for a really long period, like 15 years. It's too much. It's not his destination. So for the reserve and the great selection, the situation changed totally, because they are produced to be aged. So when they arrive in bottle, they are not really ready. They can be drinking, for sure, because this wine. But if you wait in bottle for different, and you maintain the wine in bottle for different time, during while the wine grow up and change until arrive to have the maximum point of expression. To arrive to this point for our wine, we talk about 7-8 years minimum for the reserve and 10-12 years for the great selection. So it means that this wine, they can be conserved for a really long time. Anyway, this is a general information, not only for our wine. The wine is something organic, so has a life, it's like us. And in the end, we can say that age a bottle for more than 35 or 40 years, maybe it's too much, maybe it's a little bit too much, but depend about the wine. Anyway, we don't suggest for our wine to age it for more than 40 years. All this information to arrive to say that all these bottles here, they are no more drinkable today. This is the collection of ancient bottles produced here in Meticcio. And the oldest is this one from the 1921. Consider that they are no more drinkable also for another reason, because for sure this wine was not produced with the same method of today. Because the wine, in particular in Tuscany, is something that exists, I think, from always. We have documents for the wine production in the Etruscan age, in the Roman age, but for sure it was not the same product of today. The last time that the production changed in this winery, it was the 1965. So in the 1965, from the 1965, we start with a new production that we maintain always today. Before, everything was made into the big barrels that we see now. But the wine produced into the big barrels was a totally different product respect this one, and in particular was not a wine produced to be aged. So for sure this bottle also maybe in the 1928 was no more good, okay? So this is the corridor of the big barrels. Into the big barrels, we said before that we make the blend. So after the first step of the aging, we bring the wine here, we mix, for example, 98% Sangiovese and 2% Merlot, that is the blend of the Chianti Classico, or 90% Sangiovese, 5 Merlot and 5 Syrah for the reserve. After the blend, we start here with the second step of the aging. Before we said that here the wine don't change anymore by the oak. A good question can be how is possible, because it's always oak. It's possible because they are really old. They have something around 70 years old. And after 70 years, they have already lose all the flavor that they can. So today, they can't change the wine anymore. Or anyway, you don't risk anymore for any contamination from the oak.
It doesn't affect the wine because it's already finished.
Yes, they remain just box,
Yeah.
okay, container. The bottling is a process that happens in different time, and we can continue to maintain the wine here in liquid form in the time, because it's not possible to maintain 300,000 bottles, or maybe more, because if you calculate also the bottle of the last in bottle and in box, they take to space. We have not the capacity, so we continue to maintain everything into the barrels. Here, for example, there is the Chianti Classico 2015. That is the same wine that we drink during the wine tasting. The other part is here. When we need to have this wine in bottle, we will connect everything from here to the bottling machine by pump and tube, and we will start with the bottle. So everything arrives here, okay, by tube and pump, and is connected to the other pump. This pump pushes the wine into the machine. And in general, the process is this, that the empty bottles are put here from someone and they go inside in line. They are filled by wine, closed by the cork, is at the capsule on the cork, and in the end, the label front and back. This machine in general can be used also in different time. Because, yes, we can use also at full production, but we can use in half production. For example, use the first part for the first time, okay, and stop the production here. From here, the bottles are put all together in big steel box, and the steel box bring into the storage. Only when we need to save this wine, we start with the production from here. In this way, we can have always wine available in bottle, just ready to be labeled and capsule and after ship. We can work faster in this way anyway.